Thank you very much for joining us for another Q&A at ICMI 21. I have with me today my regular co-host, Natalie Powell, and our guest today is Ken Jolivet. Ken, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, yeah. Ken Jolivet. Yeah, I'm a retired U.S. Air Force veteran of 22 years. Because of that, I retired early. I was able to travel the world a little bit, see most of the places. Australia was on my agenda, but sadly, it didn't happen when it should have happened for different reasons. But anyway, 6 of the 7 continents, lots of countries. It gave me a lot of experience to make judgments in a sense of relationships and women, men, and how men act around the globe. So yeah, that gives me a lot of experience. And because of a divorce back in 2007-8, that sort of set me on the path with the red pill and and that's how I got involved with the men's right movement and advocacy.
That's fantastic, actually, to hear that. You've been involved for quite a while.
Yeah. Do you want me to tell you the red pill story real quick?
Yes, actually, yes. That would be great. Thank you.
Not that I like to talk about it too much, but it is what starts the path, because the big problem with men and women today is the fact that most men are ignorant of what could really happen. They think it won't happen to them. They're not even aware of what would happen and what could happen. So in 2007 and 8, I was one of those guys. And it ended up costing me dearly, a 7-figure payout, because I wanted to keep my military pension for myself. So in order to do that, I had to cough up a lot of money. But luckily, I had invested wisely, and I had 4 properties and a piece of land. So I had to sell up everything that I could and the courts transferred them to her. But that wasn't the money so much. What hurt the most was the betrayal. William Congreve talks about hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. And sadly, even though I didn't do anything particularly, and it's a two-way street, a woman feels scorned no matter what. And I think some of that has to do with the fantasy thing of a marriage and a breakdown and all that. So she just became a different person. She hated me, and she did everything in her powers to destroy me. And it never stopped. And you can imagine the court battle took some time to do, over years. And she never, ever, ever let go and always tried to hurt me. And I think that's what hurt the most. So the red pill happened because of that, and parental alienation, you name it, the whole thing. So basically, I've been through the whole thing with that. And that woke me up. And I decided to write a first book in 2009/10. Went to Miami just to go to a nice place. I love sun and sand and heat. So that's why I wrote my first book. And that was the path. Yeah.
Very good. And I watched your presentation. I really enjoyed it, actually. In fact, misandry is a particular topic of interest of mine. So I was actually, and I really liked it. I think it's a great place for us to finish the conference, actually. So we just had an open discussion, and we talked about misandry there a little bit as well. But I thought having that and then coming on and talking to you in the Q&A, I thought that's a fabulous place for us to finish, because I think I don't know. What do you think about in terms of misandry, the hatred of men as a driver for so many other issues? Do you think it's behind a lot of what we see, or do you think other things are behind it?
Sadly, I think it is actually at the core of things today. And we can go back to the suffragettes, with the whole vote thing. And all you need to hear is votes for women, chastity for men. What more do you need to know? So if that isn't misandry from the start, it speaks of revenge, doesn't it? So yeah, misandry. And in the UK currently, I mean, you can talk about the buildup, what they're doing to the kids in school, for example. It starts in the primary schools. They're trying to make little boys into little girls. And it's a good point to even say this thing about in San Francisco, in California, and the National Education Authority and Department of Education, they have a program called Quit It, right? Quit It. Mm-hmm. And the whole idea of that is it's therapy for boys to make them like girls. In other words, to take away the boyhood, the malehood. And they do things like to make boys less volatile, less competitive, and less aggressive. And
Yeah.
it's the new paradigm. So you're essentially fixing boys again. And this has been going on for a while. And it's sponsored by our Department of Education. How sick is that? And of course, it's gone into every Western world. So it's nothing new. So if that isn't misandry, I don't know what is. And then you heard about the APA and Gillette. And now it's even going worse. I don't know if you know, in the UK, they literally are voting on bills to make misogyny a hate crime. And they will punish us severely. I saw it coming for years now. It started in police forces up in the north, where they were trying to track so-called misogyny in men, whistle call, harassment of asking a woman out for a date, whatever you want to call it. They were tracking it. It wasn't a crime, but they want to track it. And I knew then that it went in Nottingham. Whoever was running the police force, if it was a female as the one in charge, they took it from a women's conference, brought the idea in, and they made it into 5-6 police forces in the UK. And of course, I knew it was going to spread and become a national policy. And of course it has. Yes. And they're damn near into making that a bill. In fact, I think it's going to pass very shortly, if it didn't. So you can take misogyny and turn that into, well, the correlation, the opposite is that means it's misandry, because all their policies are basically on the hatred of men.
But of course, misandry is not going to be criminalized along with misogyny. It'll be very much a one-way street.
Of course, yeah, that's where we stand. Yeah, yeah.
I find it interesting too that, and there's, I mean, throughout Western civilization, we see this growing partisanship in a lot of discussions. But the reality is, both sides demonstrate misandry, and I think it doesn't really, to a large degree, often doesn't matter which side of politics is in, which side is running things. I think in terms of how things turn out.
No, there is no politics that represent men. That's, you know that. Mike Buchanan knows that. So, and it's the same old drum, isn't it? We know that men are disposable. That's the bottom line. Men are here, and there's that from the 1500s, Modesta Pozzo, who speaks back then, and that wasn't even the beginning of it. But her particular, 5-6 sentence line is essentially that men are there as a utility for women. They're doing all the hard work because men are made by nature stronger, and what have you, to be able to do the hard work, to bring it home for the woman so she can sit back and just take it all in and enjoy life. That was her motto back then. That's and right. That hers wasn't the only one like that. So, and then just look at warfare, it's the same old story. Men are disposable. That's the bottom line. And if countries can do the draft, and look at America, we heard from Steven Svoboda of the National Coalition for Men speaking about where they stood with getting the draft equalized for men and women. And it can't be done, even with combat roles now for the women in the military, every job open to them, and it's still not enough to make men not disposable and women disposable, sharing the burden. Even if you put them in, my belief is, as a 22-year veteran, I saw the standards drop every single time. I saw women crying at my desk so often. I saw women not being able to do their duties in peacetime because of child commitments at home, because they would come up with some reason. And who would volunteer to do that thing that needed doing? The men, because they empathized with that woman. So many women were getting away with not doing a full duty because they feminized the military. And no one will tell that story, but I can tell you, I was a senior leader in the US Air Force as I moved up the ranks. And as a young captain, in the middle ranks of dealing with the day-to-day running, I used to run airports and air traffic control as so basically the whole flying environment for air bases. And it's a tough job, and you've got to always be around. If any safety incident happened, you've got to be there. And yeah, you can't have a baby at home. So you get what I'm saying. So
yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely, I do. So we've actually got a couple of questions. Thank you very much to Douglas Wallace, who pointed out that there was a question over at Hoover, because we have a couple of different places we can get questions.
Yeah.
The question is from Hannah Gale. From Hannah Gale, who's a speaker as well. If you were to update the book "Society is Killing Men Now," what would you add or change? I think it's a really good question.
Oh, Hannah, yeah, I love Hannah. She's a great lady. We know each other, so thank you, Hannah. That's a good question. You know, I was walking yesterday, in fact, just contemplating, and I was thinking of changing the title because Elizabeth of Justice for Men and Boys never liked my subtitle, "Feminism Loses When Half Are Held Back." And, you know, I was speaking to the feminists who are good women who don't know what the real term feminism means anymore, you know, of equality. So I'm thinking I just might update Society Kills Men, because it's a good book, and it's a good model, and it talks about suicide and everything else. So I'm thinking I would change the subtitle and probably say "Suicide and Feminism," something like that. And then, of course, I would update the book, and I would probably add a bit more wokeism in there, because, you know, they're related. And like most things, I think women tend to be the ones who go in for this progressive, feminized, anti-male message and narrative. As an example, the Democratic Party in the US, okay, and they're not different from any other parties, where ever since the woman had the right to vote, and I would probably write a chapter about women and the right to vote. And it pains me to have to say it, and it's really contentious, I know it. But I think, and there are a few people who have, Janice Fiamingo did one about women in the vote, and it was excellent. I think I would add a chapter on that, because the Democratic Party, and somebody else, I forget who it was in the briefing, gave a talk about women, they make big governments. Because as we, and a few other speakers, the theme that I'm hearing now is, and it's correct, the patriarchy is now the government. So they've taken away the men out of the home, the family, not allowed to be fathers, and the government's become the patriarchy. And guess what? The average woman seems to support that, and they want that, especially now. How could they not? Because there are no men. Look, we know what the single motherhood rates are. I might as well mention it, but in the US, it's 40%, you know, children being born to unwed mothers. In Europe, let's see, here's the stats, yeah. So 40% in the US, in the EU, it's 43%. In 8 countries in the EU, it's 50%. And in France, it's 60%. So these are shocking numbers. And we know that people of color are in the 70-something%. So what that's telling you is that the drive of a patriarchy to the government is pretty solidified, actually. So, yeah. So those are some areas I could definitely update Society Kills Men. And I would probably try to make the link a bit stronger, how it's actually killing men. And I'd certainly talk more about divorce and relationship breakdown, because that seems to be another core of the problem. Relationship breakdown, no matter how you do it. Because look, a lot of people don't get married. Marriage rates have dropped since the 1800s. They're at the lowest, and they're going lower still. So I don't think marriage is coming back. But the problem with that is it's well established that cohabiting couples break up at 5 times the rate of married couples. So if married couples are breaking up 50% divorce rate, you can imagine the cohabiting ones. And then what's that going to do for the children and fatherlessness? And, you know, and then we have the misandry in the media, and I would probably focus on that too, how the media and this message denigrating men is destroying boys and males. And I would talk more about the impact to society and suicide and society, because it's going to affect financially and function-wise, let's say, because society won't be very functioning if the ones who tend to build and maintain society are not well.
Well, that's actually a really, I think, an important point right there. And you made a number of really important points, actually. But it is, I mean, there's a study out of New Zealand, for example, that looked at the tax base and gender. I don't know if you're aware of that study, Ken. We've got it on A Voice for Men. It was originally published on another site, and we eventually got permission to publish it, which is good because the original site is gone. But basically what they found in New Zealand was men were approximately revenue neutral across their lives, while women were drawing back from the government about 150,000 New Zealand dollars more than they were putting into the system. So what we were seeing there essentially was that it seemed to me that the productivity of particularly young men was what was really keeping the system running. I suppose the difference there, because the offset must be economic growth, because New Zealand's obviously still a functioning society. But the fact is the men were essentially revenue neutral across their lives. So they weren't costing the state anything, and they were actually producing something.
I think I mentioned that in my book because, yeah, we know what the tax rates are. Men are paying 75% of the taxes, aren't they? And women are spending 85% of the money that makes up the economy. And of course, they account for 90% of the domestic budget. So you only need to look at those numbers and go, okay, men are out there earning. So look at that, providing and protecting by default with those numbers. And guess who's spending it and having a good time? I mean, just quickly, in my town here, in the town I just left, we just moved here a couple months ago. But I live in a very sort of affluent area in this part of the country, and it's called Buckinghamshire in Berkshire. And we call them yummy mummies. They're everywhere. And you go into any place and they're in the cafes, they're in the restaurants. They're just having a good time, a good life. And they're men, they're making a lot of money. These are big, big houses and what have you. So there's a little microcosm, I guess, here, but I don't think so. They just have more money to go out and spend it in different ways,
And I'm actually quite a fan of men maintaining. So in general, women maintain a better work-life balance than men do, and often have more flexible time. And I'm quite an advocate of men trying to look after their health and also maintain a better work-life balance as well. And I mean, whenever for example, when I'm traveling during the day or something, I'm passing a park, I always cast my eye over to the park, and probably about 90% of the people you'll find in there will be women. And you've got this going on where women do have that much more flexibility in terms of the time and working less hours. And I don't know what your thoughts on that in terms of are men overworking, or what are your thoughts?
Yeah, that it brought me to my military career, and I remember being told over and over, "Are you going to make?" In fact, I was being told, "You must make this military career the priority over your family." Okay, that was the going in rate. This was no question. It was being told to me because I was trying to strike the balance of the two. And because of the job that I did, I actually was able to do that, because when I started as a young air traffic controller, you had shifts. So the fact that I could work these shifts, because I was enlisted at that time, the first 5 years, the sergeant, let's say, by that point. And then I commissioned as an officer at 6-year point, and that was a difficult process. And then I became the boss, and then it was 9 to 5, all the time for the next 16 years, let's say. And that was good. And then because I was very efficient at doing it, I could always leave work at 5 o'clock. I literally was sort of, I'd get up early and go in early, but I was usually in the gym at 4 o'clock, leave the gym at 5, come home. So I had a family life with these shifts and these nice work hours. But it never left me that I was being told over and over, and especially every time you left 2 or 3 years when it was time to move, you knew damn well the priority had to be, you went where the Air Force told you to go. That was what it was. But I had a big fight with my family and, my wife, because she didn't want to move, even though she knew she married a military man in the beginning, So, but this goes into Dr. Warren Farrell's talk, doesn't it? About for men now to get on, they need a purpose and they need to kind of go into the roles that traditionally women have done. Now, it's a nice theory, and I get all that, and it certainly has its place for some men, because hey, I know a few men are stay-at-home guys. Their wives work and make decent money, but they call him the artistic man, don't they? And in fact, one of this guy, he paints all the time, and he has dabbled in this and that, and he does lots of sports. So these kind of men made a little bit of money, let's say, not a lot, but they have something coming in, and they stay at home while their wives tend to work. And I know two of them like that. But my fear with that is that women don't have respect for that kind of man long term, because I've heard it over and over, and I talk about it in my Society Kills Men book. They don't want another dependent, as they say. They want an equal. In fact, they don't even want equal. They want higher. We know this. You know, the six stat things, you know, 6-pack, 6 foot tall plus, 6-figure salary, 6-inch plus, you know, to be kind of crude, but these kind of things. So this is all what they want. They don't want a dependent, and they want to know you're bringing in some money, because look, and even men, what are the two things? Somebody said it the other day. Men need two things: the admiration of their woman and respect from her. They need to know that she respects him and admires him. And unless that man is doing something phenomenal in the house, I don't think she's going to do that just because he's watching some kids at home or whatever. And I remember I've heard it many a times. The women who've loved me, you know, both wives, you know, and now I'm married again, and the word respect comes up a lot. They have to respect you. So it's really ultra important to have your woman respect you. So you better be doing something.
Yes, and sorry, I hope you didn't misunderstand me. I didn't necessarily mean like a house husband or anything like that. I just, from my perspective, I guess it looks like I'm keen to see men looking after their health a bit more and so forth, and not working themselves into an early grave, while also aware that they have to. That a lot of men, most men, will really want to achieve something in their lives, and that will give them satisfaction. So to me, it seems like there's a balancing act there.
Well, there's no question. Everything's a balancing act, isn't it? There's a saying, everything in moderation, right? Nothing to excess. So these things speak of that to just a natural way, and it has to be. Men often get accused, and I'm one of them. We ignore our health. You know, the little symptoms that come up, you put it on. That's nothing. I'll deal with that. You know, suck it up was one of my terms years ago. Probably still applies, but to a certain level. I don't like the safetyism. Everything, you know, is a problem. Everything to worry about. You can't go in, again, moderation. You can't go that way either. So, you know, a man going into the GP or medical office for every little ailment, to me, is a mistake. And that's what overcrowds the medical services today. And I see that with a lot of, let's say, female friends and people that I know, just bombarding the medical services. And I think it's just an ache, or it's just this, or it's just that. Just give it a few days, see how you feel, and go on. But yeah.
Well, indeed, men do tend to do that. And I think it touches on stoicism too, actually, which is that tendency for men to try to tough it out a little bit, which I think is at least partly innate. There is a tendency for men to do that. Absolutely. Yes. Well, that talks of that really, I think, leads to things like man flu, for example, where we already have men, you know, sure, they're as you say, if they got sick, they probably would just tough it out for a few days. If they're still sick, then they might go to the doctor. Some years ago, I got quite a bad flu, and and it's very rare to take a day off work, actually. And I actually took a day off work, and it got to 3 weeks with this flu, and I was just about to go to the doctor, and I got better. So, yeah.
That's how it works. Yeah.
I never did actually end up getting to the doctor on that occasion. But on the other hand, there are times, of course, where men should go to the doctor. And then we've got things like man flu and men being shamed into, ironically enough, it's the opposite of what we really see. The claim is that they collapse at the first sign of a problem, which, as we know, as we just talked about, is not what happens. Men, in fact, tend to keep going when they're sick.
Yeah, that's one of those neologisms I talk about, you know, man flu, man spreading, and mansplaining. this is just a technique to blame and shame men. You know, that's all it is. And I don't know. I tell that story. I was walking with my doggy, and in the park that we go to all the time, and I hadn't been there for, I don't know, 10 days or whatever. I had something pretty bad. And when she saw me, oh yeah, well, I said, oh yeah, I wasn't well, Oh, what was that man flu, she said. And of course, I don't stand for that. So I said to her, no, I just told her what she needed to hear anyway, without being too rude. But I said, look, I don't appreciate that kind of talk. You don't know what you're talking about. I was pretty ill. We don't make stuff up. I'm a tough guy. You can see it, So anyway, can't have that kind of talk. And that brings to another point, that the problem with men today is we let these things slide, you see, and they present themselves over and over and over. And we were kind of talking about that in the beginning at dinner parties and stuff. Like I said, I was out last night, dinner party, and these are nice people, but unfortunately I had a few friends with very feminist women, and they had strong viewpoints, and it was uncanny how they always got to present their viewpoints, no matter how offensive they were, at these dinner parties. And the wives, mine included, never want conflict or trouble. So your duty as a man is supposed to sit there and husband and stay quiet and just acquiesce to it all. But I can't do it. I mean, once they hit a certain boundary and start saying crazy things, I have to say something. But unfortunately, I've lost those two friends. But you know what? For me, they were never a friend in the first place. Because number one, why are you getting to say what you want to say? And the reason we lost them as friends is not because I dropped them, but they dropped us as couples. And I find that fascinating. Again, talk about the intolerance of the left and feminists. So I was willing to bear your opinions, because if you look at the broader picture, a lot of people are nice people, if you just get away from the politics and all that. And so why did they drop us, but I didn't drop them, or we didn't drop them? But that's okay, because I don't need friends like that anyway. And it was both the women, but the men stayed silent. And I remember at the one dinner party, the man was nodding his head in total agreement and trying to speak up. But that was it. That was it for him. And that's, sadly, we need to speak up. It's not easy because of the cost, right? That's what I'm saying. But you have to do it. And the opportunities, they present themselves to you over and over and over in everyday situations. And if more and more men would just say, hey, that is nonsense, that's an insult, you're offensive, no, and counter it with a fact or whatever. No, guess what? Men didn't have the right to vote in World War I either. And more than 50% of them died and served their country. The women got to stay at home and enjoy themselves without the vote either. So, and the votes came around the same time. So if you present a little fact, it shuts them up pretty fast. Oh, I didn't know that,
And in fact, we've got a couple of questions from Douglas, so we're getting to your questions in a moment. Douglas, apologies for the delay. Just wanted to add one last point there before we go to those questions. This has come up a couple of times in the conference. Men, of course, in the UK got the universal male suffrage was implemented in 1918, and universal female suffrage in 1928, meaning anyone of the age 21 or greater. Some women did get the vote in 1918, but the BBC ran a series of commercials, because we get the BBC here in Australia, it's a popular channel, and they ran a series of commercials saying about 100 years of women's suffrage in 2018. Now, just wait till 2028, and they will again run a series of commercials saying 100 years of women's suffrage. So they get two bites of the cherry. The fact that it was 100 years of male suffrage in 2018 was by the by.
Yes.
So if you don't mind, I'll move on to Douglas's question. So this is actually going back a few minutes. He's got an earlier question and then a later one. So we were talking about marriage there. You say marriage is going down and how bad that is for society. What do you think of civil union? I guess you probably did touch on that a little bit, but go on in terms of civil unionism as opposed to marriage.
Okay, I'd have to define civil union for me, because I'm not totally, I have an idea, of course, but I want to know what that means.
Right. So I'm happy if Douglas wants to jump in there. I'll have a go at essentially defining it. My understanding is that it's a legal status. Well, I think we have something similar here in Australia. You can go to the state government and register your relationship. And so it is a legally recognized relationship, but it is not a marriage. So, and I think certainly here it's easier to dissolve than a marriage, because you simply have to go to the government, fill out another form, one or both of you signs it, and then you can dissolve the civil union. I think that's similar. Please correct me if I'm wrong, Douglas, but I think that's similar to what you're looking at there. And
okay, well, that's easy for me to answer, because I don't put any stock in that at all. To me, it's a watered down version of something. I mean, how can you commit to something if it's, well, two things. Number one, you're taken away from marriage straight away, right? If marriage is supposed to be something, and let's face it, Will Nolan spoke of it yesterday, other people spoke of it in this conference, and it's a given fact. Men left on their own, the wild man, okay? Men need to be tamed. And even I totally agree with that. You can't have a man out there in the wild. He needs to be civilized to some degree. Harness the power, harness all that good. Marriage does that, right? Because it allows a man to be his best in providing and protecting. And it civilizes him, it tames him. And the second thing it does is it allows the chance for fatherhood in a good way. And my question to Will Nolan yesterday was, what is manhood? And his answer was, oh, that's an easy one, fatherhood. And I don't disagree with him. But of course, I was looking for a bit of a bigger answer about what are some of the man traits and things like that. But fatherhood is another necessary part of that. Now, I spoke just a few minutes ago and said that cohabiting couples, people who don't marry, or if it's so easy to break out, then the marriage, the relationship isn't very good. Cohabiting people break up 5 times the rate of married couples. And even I know, and the reason I got married after 10 years of dating this lady, and the only reason, and it's in my first book, the only reason I was able to marry again, because I'm not going to give half of my half again, that equals 1/4 in math, right? There's no way I was going to do that. So I needed to marry a woman who was equal or higher financially, so that if we were to break up, which second marriages, 63% of second marriages break up. So there was no way I was going to put myself in that. So if we break up, it's just simply we're both going to hurt emotionally, and we're going to feel the loss of the relationship. So, but along the way, I kept saying to myself, it was too easy to walk away. When you have, every couple is going to have fights and disagreements and what have you. Way too easy to say, you know what, I'm out of here. This is not for me. Whereas marriage, it is that commitment. Now, who was that? Was it Robin Aitken from the BBC thing? I think it was him. Or Stephen Baskerville. Locking into marriage. Marriage was a contract in the old days. You could not walk away legally from it. Of course, you could just leave and you get nothing, right? So you could still leave. But that's the idea behind it, that marriage is a commitment that makes you push it's like an athlete, isn't it? Push to the limits of your capabilities, both of you. And so that's the beauty of that. So civil arrangements, no, I don't. It takes away from the institution of good marriage, and they break down, and there's no real commitment.
Yeah, thanks. And Douglas did actually just add civil union varies around the world, but I view it as marriage light. Yes, that's certainly, I, for example, have personally had friends who entered a civil union rather than a marriage, and they informed me one day that they were breaking up, and they filled out a form, both signed it in that case. I believe it's impossible for one person to sign it in Australia, but in this case, they both signed it, and the government recognised the relationship no longer existed. So Carl's got a comment which I will get to, but we'll get to Douglas's second question, and then I'll be coming back to you, Carl. Does some of this work-life balance, particularly when comparing the sexes, depend on what you call work and life? A woman in a playground with young children is doing something important for those children. A man running a business that he loves doing might be having more fun than her. Good comment and question there, Douglas. What are your thoughts, Ken?
Yeah, Douglas, that's a good point. And I certainly didn't say anything against that, because I 100% believe that. I mean, we know that for men, work is crucial for a man. If you have no work, you have no purpose, you have no passion, perhaps. Hopefully, I mean, the problem is most men don't enjoy their job, or at least it's not uncommon that Jordan Peterson mentions it actually. So it probably is true that most men probably don't enjoy their jobs. Why? Dr. Farrell says it too, because he needs to earn more money, right? He goes to the job that he doesn't like because he knows he needs to get the best amount of money to bring home for the family. So is the man enjoying his work? Probably not. If you're Eric Clapton or one of these kind of people who, you know, you're an actor or something, you love your work. It's not even work, right? It's an absolute pleasure. So you have those kind of scenarios, but really the gift, I always said, in fact, in the first book, the gift is if you can find a job that's a passion, it's not work. So great on you if you can find that. On the woman's side of things, the best thing a woman can do in life seems to be motherhood. Will Nolan said it yesterday. For a man, it's fatherhood. For a woman, it's womanhood. For him, it's an easy answer, right? And again, I don't disagree, because nature says procreate. A woman's biological clock, I don't know, I don't care who you are. And I've seen it over and over with couples. The woman didn't want a kid, but eventually she wants a child and coerces the man into giving her one. I've seen that too recently in the last 3-4 years. Generally speaking, women want to have kids because it's the ultimate gift. And it is a pleasure to raise a child or children from an infant to a fully functioning being that you can then have in your family forever. And hopefully they look after you when you need help and support, you know, because the full circle thing happens, you know, you start off as a baby and you end up as a baby, you know, and I'm seeing that more and more in the age group that I'm a part of with, you know, mothers and fathers and what have you. So if you don't, what else is there? I mean, come on. I traveled the world for 10 years, sun, sea, and sex, right? You cannot do that for too long. It gets old and you just can't do it. So you need something more. And everyone knows what that more is.
You mentioned, of course, that women, a very high proportion of women will want a child at some point. I think it would be fair to say. And I think I'm fond of saying that each of us is the end result of more than 1 billion years of sexual reproduction. I think that's a huge selective pressure. Would you agree, though, that most men would also like to be parents? This is something. It's not just the women, that also the men. How do you feel about that?
I think I do, because I know. I never thought that I would not have kids, put it that way.
Yeah.
I didn't know when I would want kids. I didn't know, you know, how I would want them, but I knew that I would want to be a father at some point. So, and I did, you know, I did it. I chose the early track because I had a good time as a young man. So I married young because I had been around a lot, having fun. And so for me, it seemed the right thing to do when I found the right woman, because I had dated loads and loads of women before. So when I met this one, I knew, wow, okay, this one is special. So I think I'm going to go out, even though I was 22 years old. And then we had our first kid by mistake at 22. So I was a young dad, but you know what? I was a cool dad. Yeah. I was the dad taking the kids everywhere. I was wrestling with him. I was diving, I was swimming, I was teaching them all kinds of sports, you name it. And I had all kinds of boys with me all the time. So I had fond memories of that. And so, and I like to think from what I'm seeing that a lot of men, look, they do want to have a relationship. They want a woman, you know, they want a wife, they want somebody special. I hear it over and over. And I think by extension, once you do that, it's like I tell a few people who are dating, and when I see that they're dating someone who isn't the right woman for them, and they're trying to make a shoe fit. Mm-hmm. And this is the problem. Too many men, they get involved with a woman just because she likes him. He doesn't go through his thing and go, well, is this the one for me, really? So men get chosen rather than choosing, whereas I chose. But can you choose wisely? You can choose wisely for a moment in time, but it doesn't mean you can stretch it, you know, forever, because relationship, everything may be temporary. I don't know. But anyway, the signals are there that these men, they try to make the shoe fit, and they're making some bad choices. And I try to highlight that to them, and they drag it on. So emotions wrap you up, is what I'm saying, that the longer you're in something, even if it's not right, you'll get caught up in it because you invested more, and then you're trapped, and you won't get out of it, even though you know you should, because it's easier and it's convenient and it's comfortable. And the same thing, I think, when a man gets married, by extension, or even a long relationship, the next extension is having children. It's going to happen, I think. So, yeah. And I think they know that in the back of their head.
So there's a comment. There's been a few comments that are made through, and I'll get to as many of them as I can before we finish up. We've got a few more minutes before we need to wrap up. But there was one particular comment. Now let's see if I can find it again. Okay, right. The Carl made, it was actually a few minutes ago. So you said something which I think caused a few people's ears to prick up. Carl said, this is a few minutes ago, Grant, he said, are men animals that need to be tamed? So I thought that comment would probably catch a few people's attention. So I don't know. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that aspect of what you were talking about?
Yeah, it's a fascinating subject. And one of my favorite books is Eisenhower's Iron Man by Robert Blyford. And he does it in the story of the wild man in the forest that's killing all the king's people. And he sends a knight, says, I can find this one. And it relates to manhood. And the mother holds the key under the pillow, where they catch the wild man and they lock him up. And the mother has the key under the pillow, and the boy has to go get the key. And we're speaking of manhood there. So, and I would also refer again to Jordan Peterson. He speaks of a lot, the dangerous man and the weak man. The most dangerous man is the weak man, because wait till you see what he's capable of and what he allows to happen and enables. Whereas one of the best men you can have is the strong, dangerous man who can control his angers, passions, and all that. So, and I think he referred to Jocko Willink also, one of those hard kind of guys. And, you know, you look at some of these serious alpha men. So I think I get his point that why would you want to tame something, right? It's nature. Let that be. Well, if we let men be what they really are, it could be pretty tough, right? So in this case, since we're humans with a bit higher intelligence and we need structure and less chaos and more safety and less danger, it is good. And then look, why did they do chivalry in the medieval times? Why did the concept of gentleman come out? Because that's what they're doing. And I don't think being a gentleman was a bad thing. It was a good thing. And you know what the nicest thing is, and I get asked that a lot, is, you know, why do you climb that mountain? Well, because I can, and it's there, right? And why do you know, I go to the gym and, you know, I lift twice my body weight, you know, on the bench press, which is it doesn't happen very often, you know, 170 kilos at 83 kilos weight. Now, I control my power, and you could do a lot of harm in society, you know, with that kind of strength and certain aggressions. But what good is that going to do? But it's nice to know I have the power and the strength if I need it, you see? And so I walk around confidently in most places and environments, and I've never had an issue, although I'm getting old now, I'm 57. So it's going to change, obviously, right? At some point. But I've never been scared, and I've never worried about anything, you know, because of that. So it's good to have the capability, but you better be able to control it, and you should control it, because it's a responsibility. But if I ever saw a woman in trouble or a person in trouble, I'd be the guy to go and help you. So you want a man like me, and we want men like that. So yeah, you do have to tame, you know, unfortunately, the human male.
Thank you very much. I think part of the reason that gets people's attention is because feminists are often telling men how to act. And so I think when we hear things like that, it certainly gets our attention. But thank you very much for explaining that, for your position.
Yeah.
So I think we should probably wrap up soon. I was going to say, you mentioned chivalry and so forth. That's one of my colleagues, Peter Wright, runs gynocentrism.com.
Yeah, I've read it.
Chivalry and stuff too. So yes, Peter actually lives in my part of the world, a couple of kilometers.
All right, yeah, I've read his book, and you always see his stuff, so it's fantastic, Peter.
Yeah. So thank you very much. Apologies, I didn't get to all the comments. I usually try to read out a few comments. We did get to the questions, but thank you very much, Ken. It's been enlightening, and I do want to clarify something that I said earlier. I said it was the last speech. I think there actually are a couple more after this. So
yeah, I think so. Yeah.
But no more for us.
Yeah, exactly. No more for us. Exactly. This is actually
yeah. Good. You guys have worked hard, and I appreciate what you're doing, because it's a heck of a thing to put on this kind of a conference like this. I know.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. And thank you so much for coming on. And we are pretty tired at this point, and we're glad that this is our last session. Yeah. We're going to relax a little bit to watch the last couple of sessions.
Well, thanks for bearing with me and doing it, because I know it was not easy. Yeah.
Thank you very much, kids. And it's been lovely to talk to you, actually, because we've sort of, talked online, I think, and,
Yeah, nice to get to know you and meet you. Yeah.
Exactly. First time we've actually talked face to face, I think. So
love to have you on the tackle box one night.
Thank you. Yeah, we'll be in touch, I'm sure. We'll
Yeah, Natalie was just saying we'll get you on the tackle box, which is our regular vlog, if you're interested.
Okay, yeah, great. I would be, yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And thank you to all of our attendees. This is Australia signing out. Bye-bye.
And hey, Sydney Watson. Sydney McTowell.
Yes, Sydney McTowell. Sorry.